ISIS called him one of their soldiers. The terror suspect who drove a rented truck down a New York City bike path on Halloween, killing 8 people.
We just looked outside the window and they were just laying there, like, dead.
He then crashed into a school bus.
I heard a loud bang. The front of the car was totaled at that point, and the guy coming out of the truck was injured.
He was also carrying paintball and stun guns, shouting Allahu Akbar, or God is great in Arabic. Then the suspect, Saifullah Saipov, was shot and wounded by police, and in his hospital bed, requested an ISIS flag.
Saipov allegedly admitted that he was inspired to commit the attack by the ISIS videos he watched.
U.S. Attorney June Kim says there were thousands of images and dozens of videos on his phones
depicting, among other things, ISIS fighters killing prisoners by running over them with a tank, beheading them, and shooting them in the face.
He was particularly inspired by a video of ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi urging followers to respond to the killings of Muslims in Iraq.
I think that the real difference between ISIS and modern-day extremist organizations is their use of social media.
Mark Wallace is the CEO of the Counter-Extremism Project.
I studied terrorism way back in the 1980s, and certainly there were terrorist groups and extremist groups back then, but their propaganda machines were largely limited to handing out flyers in underground bars and coffee shops. Now, if you're an ISIS propagandist or an extremist that's looking to promote an ideology, a call to action, or a radical to commit a terrorist act, or even a fundraise, you can produce slick videos or social media posts that emanate from some of the world's most dangerous locations and literally reach into communities around the corner from where we all live here, for me in New York, to the West Coast and throughout our country. That's an incredibly dangerous phenomenon. Extremists have perfected it. It has been ubiquitous on social media, and it's up to all of us to say as a culture, we're not going to allow extremists and terrorists to co-opt a cyberspace to allow cyber jihad that threatens all of us.
So the ISIS video making process has been going on for several years. They had all those beheadings, and they loved to scare the West. Now, ISIS doesn't seem to have its caliphate anymore. Have we seen those kinds of videos anymore, or has it become different?
Certainly, when you take away their ability to have a safe haven in a capital like Raqqa, it makes it harder for ISIS sympathizers to promote terrorist ideology and their extremist ideology online and in encrypted messaging and on social media platforms. But they're still there. It's still far too ubiquitous, and we have to, as we took territory back from ISIS on physical land, we have to retake cyber territory back from them so that it is no longer ubiquitous. Now I think we have to shift our focus into reclaiming cyberspace from them. Just the other day, it was announced in the New York Times that Google YouTube, frankly, after a campaign of several years by our group and me personally, decided to remove Anwar al-Awlaki, who was the most prolific online extremist in the history of the Internet. He was such a bad actor that President Obama decided to kill him with a drone. By our count, in our study, at least 90 terrorists were influenced to take action by Anwar al-Awlaki either before or after his death. We're talking the Boston bombers, the Orlando nightclub killer, the recent action in Lower Manhattan, Charlie Hebdo in Europe.
Anwar al-Awlaki was born in New Mexico and lived in the U.S. till he was 7. When he was 20, he returned to go to college, studying civil engineering and then getting a master's in education. While here, he preached to extremists, even interacted with 3 of the 9/11 hijackers. In 2002, he returned to Yemen, and 8 years later, al-Awlaki was designated global terrorist. And in 2011, he was killed, targeted by the military.
For a lot of people, he was the voice of the jihad against the West.
Lucas Tomlinson is a Fox producer at the Pentagon.
For the last 8 years since the Fort Hood shooting, Anwar al-Awlaki's videos have still managed to stay on the internet and radicalize people all over the world. So it's incredible that it's taken 8 years to get these videos pulled down. part of the reason is because of the increased attention on Russia's meddling in the U.S. elections. There's been a lot of congressional hearings of late, and there's been pressure on Congress to tell Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube that, hey, why are you shilling for the Russian government and meddling in U.S. elections? And they have all pledged to do more to scrub and clean up the content, just the way you would expect, criminal behavior to not have a home on the internet. Now, instead of saying, oh, Al-Awlaki, this is a case of free speech, there's a lot more pressure now from the Trump administration to get Facebook, Twitter, YouTube to cut out these videos.
We have to decide as a culture that we're not going to allow that type of content to be ubiquitous on social media platforms.
How do you deal with the people who might be lone wolves? Those who see this material, find it, download it, look at it at their home. How do we find them?
Well, you know something? That is the great challenge. And I think what we're trying to do here by limiting the expansive nature of the Anwar al-Awlakis, we're decreasing the likelihood of the lone wolf.
Terrorists are constantly reaching out online. Just yesterday, we reported ISIS has a new threat for the Vatican, just in time for the holidays.
An image being shown on one of their websites, as well as their messaging service, showing a car careening towards St. Peter's, a masked jihadist at the wheel. Inside, an assault rifle, maybe a backpack bomb, with the headline, Christmas Blood.
Fox's Greg Palcott in London. Both ISIS and Al-Qaeda also have online magazines they produce, trying to recruit possible lone wolves. And Saifullah Saipov, the New York City terror suspect, reportedly followed instructions in one of those issues on how to carry out a truck attack.
Why are the internet service providers offering a platform to an Al-Qaeda magazine? You have a work on websites, I'm sure, in your business. There are internet service providers are domiciled in all sorts of locations. Why are the internet service provider allowing a platform for an Al-Qaeda magazine? It's inexplicable to me. It should either be regulated and shut down, or we should decide as a culture that it's unacceptable. In my opinion, given what Al-Qaeda is, no legitimate internet service provider that is doing business in any reasonable place in the world should be allowed to put up an Al-Qaeda magazine.
In the end, is this winnable? Can we stamp it all out, or is it just impossible to stamp all of it out and you can only narrow it down?
No, I think that making it easy is a problem. There's been terrorism forever, and sadly, there will be terrorism for a long time. But we're living in an age when it was far too easy to become a radical, to become an extremist, and to join a terrorist group. It shouldn't be easy to be a teenage girl in Denver, Colorado, and be recruited to be an ISIS bride and go to Raqqa, Syria. We need to drive these guys, these recruiters, and they're mostly men, the worst extremists, into dark places, make it harder for them to recruit, and make it less likely that they can reach into our neighborhoods, so that we don't have this big problem of foreign fighters and lone wolf. We will always have bad content and media out there, but let's not make it so easy.
Mark Wallace, thank you very much.
Thank you.